55 years ago, this month, in February 1960, I got out of the service. I was on active duty. I came out. I didn't want to stay in the service, so I went into an active reserve unit, and I wanted to go into teaching and coaching. I started to go around to schools, and as I was getting interviewed for jobs, every interview ended the following way. You're a nice fella, your credentials are in order, but you don't have any experience. Finally, I said, this is going nowhere. So in order to support myself, I got a job at the Cleveland Pneumatic Tool Company, which made landing gears. I was a contract administrator. I did not like it, but I did it. And every day during the lunch hour, instead of going out for lunch, I would go downstairs to a public phone booth with a pocket full of nickels, dimes, and quarters. I would start calling schools. And whenever they said that they had a possible opening, my question was, does it call for experience? Most of them said yes. Finally, one day, I made a call out here. Talked to a lady, I believe her name was Mrs. Kraus, very nice lady.
Yes.
She said, I think we're going to have an opening in the fall, and would you like to come out and see the superintendent for an interview? I said, certainly. So I drove out here. It was on a Saturday at the building across the street. I walked into the back of the building. There was a gentleman in the building there painting a wall or something. And I said, can you direct me to the superintendent's office? And he said, yeah, it's up at the top of the steps. You'll see it, it's up there. Just keep going to get to the top. I said, okay. Went up there, sat there 5 minutes, 10 minutes, nobody showed up. Finally, who walks in? The painter. And he said, sorry, I'm late. My name is Bill Mercer. I had to paint on. And he said, now, you heard that we have a possible opening for a job. I said, yes, I do. He said, well, I have one question to ask. I said, what's that? He says, do you know anything about wrestling? I said, yes, I do. He says, good, we're on the right page. He said, we have to start a wrestling program. Just about everybody else that we participate in our various sporting activities has a wrestling program, and we don't. He said, you think you can start one? I said, yes, I can. He said, okay, good. He said, let's take a walk downstairs. So we started walking down the stairs. And he said, he said, I've seen this wrestling. He said, it's pretty good. He said, it's very interesting. The boys are small, they're medium-sized, they're big, they're very aggressive. And he said, I think it's nice. I said, well, I'm glad you said that, because I'm sure when we talked to most of the boys who are going to come out, or even I was going to ask you if you think it's that stuff you see on television. Because a lot of the kids, when we had our first meeting, they thought they were going to be throwing chairs at each other, throwing each other in the ring, and so forth. We started the program, and he gave us, we didn't really have a place, we worked on the stage in the auditorium. We put gym mats together, we tied them with shoestrings or laces or whatever we could find so they wouldn't spread apart. And we learned a few holds, we learned the rules, and we had a good turnout, nobody quit. We had all the weights covered, and we did very well. We practiced hard, and we actually learned a lot. We actually, in the first year, had a few scrimmages. I think we even had a meet or two at the end of the season, and we concluded it at that. The next year, they all came back. Now, the first year, I only really catered to freshmen, sophomores, and juniors. I didn't want any seniors, because to teach them the wrestling, they're not coming back the next year, so who needs them? They become graduates. Right. So anyway, we got this thing going. Now, after a couple of years of wrestling on these gymnasium mats with a plastic cover, and the mats would kind of slide apart, during some of the meets and practices, some of the fellas from the opposing schools, as well as ours, when they were wrestling, you'd step into a hole. And it could cause an injury. So about the third year we started, the program was going, and we were going fairly well. I went to Mr. Mercer and I said, look, all of the schools are going to what they call a Resolite wrestling mat. It's a rubberized mat. And it comes in a big roll, you roll it out, you're finished with it, you roll it back up, and that's it. He said to me, well, what does this cost? I said, well, it's about $3,500. He said, ooh, boy. I said, well, that's the going cost. He said, the teachers want a pay raise this year. And I've told them that we don't have any money for that. He said, give me a couple days to think about this and I'll call you back. I said, okay. So he calls me at home one night and he says, you know, I've thought about it and I got a couple questions for you. He said, can we pay this next year on installments? I said, okay, I'll find out. And he said, if we order it, could we have it delivered in the summertime when nobody's here? I said, all right, let me check. And I called the sporting goods place, and they said, yeah, we'll bill you next year. You can pay us on a couple of installments. And when do you want it delivered? I said, well, bring it like the end of June or first part of July. They said, wonderful, we'll do that. Anyway, about 4 or 5 days before the school year was over, I get a frantic call from Mr. Mercer. He says, we have a serious problem. I said, what's the matter? He says, the mat was delivered, it's sitting in the hallway, and all the hotheads are down at my office already, and they want to hang me. They want to know what this thing is and how much it costs. He says, what do you suggest? I said, well, let me think about it. So the next day I called him back. I said, well, what you got to do is, first of all, what we were wrestling on was a hazard, a physical hazard, and secondly, some of the schools were calling, so maybe 1 or 2. They didn't want to come over here anymore and wrestle on that mat because they all had the other mats. And they said, why don't you come to our place and so forth and so on. I said, you can also tell these teachers that our program was actually making money now. We were paying our own way. We were starting to get bigger turnouts for the matches, and our expenses weren't high. We had to have an official, and that's it. We had buses wherever we went. Wrestling was not a sport. We had to buy a lot of equipment. So he said, okay, I'll see what I can do. A couple days later, he calls me back, and I said, how did it go? He says, great. I said, it did? He said, yeah. I said, I told 6 or 7 of them to come on down to the office. We had a meeting. He said, these were the ones who were, heading up the headache crowd for the pay raises. I said, okay. I said, what did you tell them? He said, I told them that we had to have this thing because of safety. And we also had to have it on a financial basis, because if not, we're going to lose money if we have to have all our meets away from home. The schools aren't going to come over here. And then I told them that if we have to return this mat, I'm going to send letters home to all of the parents who have wrestlers, and I'm going to tell them, because the teachers wanted a pay raise, that we had to send the mat back, and I may have to discontinue the program. He said, now how do you think that's going to go when voting time comes around for a bond issue or an operating levy? He says, because when these things pass, they never pass by very much. He said, so 70 or 80 votes are going to go right down the tubes. I said, I want a show of hands right now. Should we send the mat back? He said, there were 7 of them in the room. Not one hand went up. He said, so we kept the mat. Now, a couple of stories about Mr. Mercer. I think he liked me. He started to get into this wrestling because occasionally I would see him at the matches, even some of the away ones. And he would call me at my home a couple times a week, an evening, and he would ask about certain boys. He would say, well, how's this kid do? Or is that kid hurt? He didn't look so good. Or is he sick? And then I knew he was at the meet. So I would give him all the information and so forth and so on. And there was a time we had a scrimmage scheduled down at Stowe. It was after school. And we were waiting for a bus. And it was pouring cats and dogs outside. And he came wandering down the hall. I guess he was leaving for the day. And he said to me, Coach, he said, where are you headed for? I said, well, we're going down to Stowe, but we're waiting for a bus. He said, well, let me look into it. About 10 minutes later, this old bus comes out. Must have been the oldest one they had. It's just burping and belching, and it looked awful. And the door opens, the kids get on the bus. Who's driving? Him. And like Dan said, he is a driver. We got on that bus, 91, as you well know, that then was 2 lanes all the way down to Stowe. That bus was going 65 miles or 70 miles an hour. And this guy's really got the, down to the floor. Now we get there, and we get off the bus, and the boys are starting to go into the school. And I'm the last one off, as I go back into the building at Stowe, and I take a look back for some reason or other, there he is, with the hood up on the bus. It must have conked out. It's pouring rain, and he's got his suit on, and he's really reaching into the hood there. He's trying to fix the bus to get it going. So we had our scrimmage, and another bus came, picked us up. The next day, he wanted to know how the scrimmage went. And the guy was getting soaked with this suit on. It was really something. Another time, we wrestled at Shaker. I'm trying to think how long ago that was. It must have been a year or two later. And we had a big match down there. You were the main guy. Yeah, because you won the match for us. But anyway, after the match was over, my old coach came over and suggested to me, congratulated me and so forth and so on. And I turned around and he was there. And he said, gee, this was great. This was wonderful. I said, oh, thanks. He said, this was great. This was great for the team, for you, and for the school. I said, okay. And then I said to myself, now I know he really likes me. And I got job security maybe for another year or two. So as far as the wrestling, we continued on, and we had a good program. We had a real cast of characters for wrestlers. We had some very intelligent wrestlers who were smart. We had some very not so smart wrestlers. We had very aggressive wrestlers. We had some that were finesse wrestlers. And it made our team very diverse, and it was just terrific. And I never had a problem with any of the fellas on the team, with one exception. And Danny, you couldn't do this today. We went to Hudson for a wrestling match. I had a young man on our team who was good, but he kept running out of gas. Like the third period of the match, he just was he was empty. I said to him, "Are you sick?" He said, "No." I said, "Are you sure? Do you have a cold? Do you have a fever? Do you have the flu?" "No." And even at practice, he was kind of withering out on us terribly. So we went down to Hudson, and we had this match with Hudson. And sure enough, he wrestles good the first two periods. The third period, he's like a wet noodle out there. In between periods, while they're changing, and he was started the third period, I went into the locker room, and I looked through his locker. And what I found in there was a pack of Lucky Strikes in his collar. So when the match was over, I called him over, and again, as I say, you can't do it what I did then. Now, I said, "Young man, you know we have rules." The rules were no smoking, no drinking during the wrestling season. I don't care what you do with yourself afterward. I don't care about girlfriends, that's fine. But anyway, this is a no-no. You're killing the team because you're costing us any close match because you can't finish the match. I said, "You don't belong on this team. You're finished right now. I want your uniform when you take it off." And we left him there. I said, "You can find your own way home." Now, that was those days. I never heard a word. I think he was probably afraid to tell his parents maybe because they would cut out the smoking. But anyway, that was one circumstance. Then, about 3 years after I was there, I took over the baseball program, and I'll only tell you one story that's very good about the baseball program. When I took it over, I went in and I looked at the equipment to see what we had. Well, the uniforms are all old rags, probably from the time you were there. And, I mean, we had no equipment. There was about 4 or 5 beat-up old baseballs, a couple of rotten old wooden bats that were rotting out, I think, from who knows. Anyway, I went to Mr. Mercer, and I said, "Mr. Mercer, you know, the baseball program, I'm going to try to do a good job. I want them to look like baseball players, even if they don't play like baseball players." He said, "That's fine." He says, "What do you need?" I said, "We need new uniforms. We actually need bases. We need bats and balls and so forth." He said, "Just a minute." He picks up the phone and he calls somebody. And he's talking to, it's probably a man on the other end, and he says, "I'm going to send the baseball coach over to see you now." He says, "I want you to take good care of him." And that was the end of the conversation. He said to me, "Now, you get in your car and you go up to the Chrysler plant. And here's the fella that you see." I said, "Okay, fine." Walked in, asked for this man, went to his office. He must have been the plant manager or the general manager or something at that time. He said, "Coach, I understand that you have a baseball situation and you need some help." I said, "Yes, we do." He says, "What do you need?" I said, "Well, we need new uniforms, new equipment, and the whole thing." He says, "Okay." He opens up his desk drawer, pulls out a metal box, he starts peeling off $100 bills. He peels off $1,500, and he says, "Is that enough?" And I says, "I believe it'll be plenty. We can do that." Now, at that time, ladies and gentlemen, baseballs, American League official baseballs, were $27 a dozen. Wooden bats were $2.50 a piece. To buy a uniform for a young man, with the uniforms that we had, were probably $25. So, needless to say, we had plenty of ammunition to work with. I took several of the boys down to the sporting goods place. I knew who my good ball players were going to be. Let them pick out bats for themselves. And everything went just terrific. A couple of times, Mr. Mercer came by the Ball Diamond to see some games. And about 1 year after that, we switched. When we went into the Chagrin Valley League in the spring, the games were getting so rained out that we decided to play our high school baseball in the summertime. We were going to use boys going into the 10th grade, going into the 11th grade, and going into the 12th for the coming year. There was no bus transportation. They were supposed to get to these games by themselves. And it turned out very well for a couple of years until they changed back again to the spring. But for about 2 years, we had summer baseball. I did one thing, which I'm sure some of these ball players will probably remember the rest of their life, and this will be the last story I'll tell. I knew the coach over at Brooklyn High School. Brooklyn is on the other side of town. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. They played at a Brooklyn Recreation Center. They had lights. They had a lighted field. So I called them up and I said, "You know, these kids probably never play a night game in their life. How about if we come over there, I'll bring the baseballs, I'll pay for the umpires, let's play a doubleheader, and how long is the pool open till?" And they said, "And we'll make a picnic on it." And he said, "Well, we can keep it open as long as you want it to. It usually closes about 10 or 10:30. He said, "Well, we'll keep it open." So we played our first baseball game at 7:30. We stopped at about 8:30. And then we played a night game. I think we actually got 7 innings in. And then the boys all went to the swimming pool, had a nice night. We went after the game. There was a Manners Big Boy on Brook Park Road. I think it's still there. Still there? Yeah. And we pulled in there with the bus. And I bought everybody a hamburger. I was broke when we went home, but they all had a good time. They went swimming, and everything turned out just great.
And I'll never forget it.
So, other than that, I can tell you a few other stories about Mr. Mercer, but at this point, I think that's enough right now. Pardon me?
What year was that story?
With the baseball?
Yeah.
I'm going to say about 1966 or 67. And we had some good baseball players. As a matter of fact, I don't know if anybody remembers Billy Coleman.
Oh, yeah.
Billy Coleman was a big kid. He could hit a baseball a mile, and he could hit a curveball. So what I did is, and he was a smart boy. He was a good student. So I got a hold of my old coach over at Shaker, Fred Hyman. I said, "Fred, I got a ball player here. I want to get him looked at." So he called somebody at the Indians, and then he told me to call a guy at Pittsburgh. So they came over, and they looked at him, and they said, "Yeah, this kid's good. He's good. He played third base, and he could throw the ball first one. He got a rocket arm." And then I called a coach, the guy that I knew that coached at Cleveland Heights, and he got the job up at Northwestern, George McKinnon. He came down and saw him a couple of times play, and he offered him a half scholarship to Northwestern. Northwestern couldn't give full scholarships in minor sports. Then Billy's father, Bert, who had the supermarket down here, Sparkle Market, some of you probably remember that. He was a Michigan graduate. He called the Michigan coach down. The Michigan coach watched Billy, and Billy got a scholarship, a full scholarship to Michigan. And he went up there, and he had a wonderful time because his scholarship lasted 1 year. Because Billy found girls, Billy found booze, and that ended the scholarship. But he did graduate from Michigan, I'm sure. So basically, that's it for now. I left left here in 1968, and I'll just tell you the only reason I left, it was wonderful here. Guys like Dan and all the coaches that I always worked with were terrific. Nobody bothered me. I did my own thing. I left for one reason. I had a wife, 3 kids, and I was never home. Between teaching, coaching, and 3 jobs, I was selling insurance part-time. I got a part-time job at the racetrack on Saturdays selling tickets. And I was just never there. And finally, I just said, you know, this can't be. I can't do this. My last salary here at the school, the last year I was here, it was about between $700 and $800 a month. So you can add that up, it was less than $9,000 a year. I couldn't make it on that. And when I went in to tell Mr. Mercer that I was going to leave, he just said, you know, if this was a business, I could give you a nice raise. But he said, we have a schedule, and we have to go by the schedule, by the number of years experience you have and all that type of thing. He said, I can't pay any more money. I said, I realize that, but I got to leave. And that's it. After that, I went into business and stayed in business, and fortunately, I'm still alive and still in business. Thank you very much.
That was good.
Mr. Emmett, did any memories come to mind now?
No, you know, we all have praised the man that needed to be praised.
That's tough. Oh, that's tough. That's tough. That's tough.
Marjorie, tell us a story.
No, all I'm going to do is say that those kids that had you around were awful.
Yeah, they were.
Well, I came up with some crazy ideas for those kids. I'll tell you, with the wrestling, we had one way they could lose weight, folks. It was called oranges and X-Lax. Because they had to make certain weights.
Oh my God.
Another real cute wrestling. Can I tell one more wrestling story? You know, in high school sports, and you see it all when you watch professional sports and you watch college and so forth, it's very difficult to win games, matches, and so forth away from home. For some reason or other, the visiting team doesn't get the breaks. When I started here, I had to help Mr. Warder Powell, which the football the first year. Now, the football was a disaster. Not because of Mr. Powell, but it just we're a football school. If we would score 3 touchdowns away from home, maybe 1 would count. Because there was always a flag drop somewhere. Well, who did what? 35 was holding, you know, or something like that. It was just terrible. In wrestling, each school got their own officials. That was another thing. We had a little round with Kenston all the time, and every time we went over there, anybody of ours that were put on their back for a half a second, bingo, you're done. It's pinned. Now, it was supposed to be about 3 seconds before the referee would call it. He always used the same referee. So a couple of times, I had a friend of mine who was a retired coach from Bedford. I had him come up to our school for refereeing. And we had an important meet with Kenston once, and I told him, I said, now look, I have this 165-pound boy. He's been very sick. Today's his first day back. He's not going to be able to make it through the whole 3 periods. Will you do me a favor? He says, what's that? I said, you know, if he, by some reason or other, can turn the guy over on his back, you know, John, do me a favor, make it quick. So sure enough, that was McGrath, by the way. He did turn the guy over. That was the fastest pin in the history that I ever saw in my life. I mean, that coach came over afterward. He said, what the hell happened here? I said, well, you saw it. He said, saw it. He said, I blinked and it was over. He said, he says, where'd you get this guy from? I said, where do you get your guy from? Because that happens to us all the time over there. So anyway, those were just some fun things that happened. And it just was a great experience here. I wish I could have stayed longer, but unfortunately, I just couldn't financially stay longer. Thank you.
The home team always has the advantage.
anything funny stories you can share with us?
No, because every time I talk
It
about
gets emotional.
No, get them.
I know.
Well, that's the reason I'm asking you for a funny story.
It's too hard.
You remember something you'd like to share?
I could tell a funny story about Dan.
Story about Dan.
I don't know if you remember this, Dan. I'm going to test your memory here. I was walking through the high school one day, and they were going out on a track meet. And I ran into Dan, and Dan, I said, "Where are you going today?" And he said, "We're going up to Warrensville Heights." Well, I lived in Warrensville Heights at the Ellicott Park Apartments, and right behind the apartments was the Warrensville High School. And he said, "We're going to dedicate the meet to Mr. So-and-so because he passed away, and we're going to give, if we win, we'll give the trophy to his wife." I said, "Well, that's very nice."
Mr. Carnot.
Okay, fine. So anyway, I get up there, and the meet is going on. I parked my car right, behind my apartment. I said, "I'm going to walk over and see how they're doing." Now, Dan, I don't know if you remember this, and you may deny this, but definitely, I saw this with my own eyes. I walked over and I said to him, "How's the meet going?" He said, "Well, if we win the last event, we'll win the meet." And I said, "What's the last event?" He says, "It's a relay." He says, "But he says, I've got a couple of kids that, they get a little short-strided at the end, and they're not really long relay people, but I think we'll do okay." Anyway, the meet goes off, and there's 4 runners. Okay, our first 2 runners go out there very well. The third runner, so-so. The last young man gets the baton. And whoosh, boy, he just goes out there like a rocket. As they start to turn around the turn, coming down the home stretch, I could see his stride getting shorter and shorter. All of a sudden, I see Daniel Emmett, who was on the inside of the track with the other coaches and always wore this stopwatch around his neck, take this stopwatch, pull it off, and start cranking it up and start running alongside this kid and screaming and hollering, "You better not put on here, I'm going to kick your butt, don't you dare!" And he ran to the finish line, and I think this kid won by about that much. Dad, if you were swinging that stopwatch at a kid, he'd have his attorney there the next day.
That's right, baby.
Turn me off the line.